I'll be making a macro where, depending on whether the cell in D is yes or no, the cells in column A through C will be locked or not locked. You can use this to make it so you don't accidentally change any value in the cells here. And you can also use it later on when I make the next portion to decide who's allowed to change the values. So you might have workers that are allowed to select and copy these values and refer to them, but they aren't allowed to actually change the values. Anytime I work with macros where I have to protect and unprotect, I like having these helper macros that just make it quicker. Right now I need to have the macro run anytime I change the cell in column D. So I can't make my macro in a module, I have to add it in the sheet that I want the macro to run in. Right now I have to go into the VBA editor, the sheet, and then here where it says general, I click and say worksheet. And then it creates a new macro with the worksheet selection change, which would run anytime I select a new cell. That's not what I want it anytime I change the value of a cell. I'll just go to that drop down and select change and delete this one. And in here, I want this to run only when I change a cell in the D column, not any cell whatsoever. First of all, I want to check if the cell I've changed can be found within the D column. And before I do anything else, I want to first select the whole D column and press Ctrl 1 to open the number formatting, and then I'm just removing protection. So this check needs to be removed so it isn't locked, which a normal cell is. So first I'll say if the intersection here I'm saying if I can't find an intersection between the changed cell and the entire D column. So if I change the cell in E, then the changed cell target will be E something, and there's no overlap or intersection between the D column and a value in the E column. But if I change these cells, then I have two cells that are found within the D column, and then my macro would run. I'll wrap the whole function within an onError resume next block, because if I try to unlock a sheet that hasn't been locked, then VBA will throw an error. First I want to check if the target is equal to no. If my target is equal to no, then I want to remove a protection on the sheet, and this is a step that can fail. Since I'm inside of a worksheet, I can use the me keyword to refer to the sheet itself instead of saying active sheet or saying sheet 1. Here I'm saying I want to add and allow edit ranges, which can be found inside of the review under protect and then allow edit ranges. And here I've already added 2 when I was testing things out. And basically this is a cell that can be changed even when a sheet is locked, which I'll need because I want you to be able to change the drop down menu. And I'm just using the Danish word for area, and you can use whatever word you want. You could also just have it be the target row, but that might be confusing if you have a lot of ranges in here. Here I'm saying that I'm logging my sheet using the password up in my variable. I'm just allowing some options here. And then lastly I'm saying that you can only select cells where I have unlocked them. So these locked cells will no longer be available. And just as before, I'm going to copy this code because I always have to unselect, or rather I have to unprotect my sheet, and I always have to add the logging again. But instead of adding an allowed edit ranges, I need to delete it. First I have to say that these cells are no longer locked, which I can just copy and paste and say that should be false. So A through C is no longer locked. And then I'll say that I want to delete the allow edit ranges. At that point I can test it out and say, now when I change this to be yes, nothing should actually happen. And I don't get an error when I try to protect contents that aren't locked, or trying to delete this allow edit ranges when it doesn't exist. And when I select this to be no, I am no longer able to click on these. So no matter how hard I try, I can't. I can only select the D. And these other cells have also been locked because I haven't explicitly said that you're allowed to change them, which only happens when this cell is equal to yes. So right now I can't select the third row either, but when I set this to yes, I am able to. And again, when I set that to no, it's locked again. So this is mildly useful if you have a lot of rows and a lot of columns and you don't want to accidentally change something. You only want to change it when you've explicitly said so. And if you want it to be really fancy, you could add to this the part where you say yes and say maybe you want to have a logging sheet that says what was the username that said that you were allowed to change this, what was the original value, what are the new values, and so on, and what date and time did they do it. But if you want that kind of security, you should probably use another method, unless you really want to only use Excel. This was macro part 1, which is really only useful if you want to avoid your user from changing cells they aren't supposed to change. So accidentally just hitting your keyboard and typing something in, which you probably don't need and it doesn't help for auditing purposes. But I'm going to add version 2, which is going to have you, when you say no, it's just as it was before, you can't check these cells, but when it says yes, you are able to change them, but only if you have the password. So this adds a second layer of authorization and checking and allows you to do some auditing, because now I can say that yes, some people may be allowed to change them, and you can go in here and you can copy the value, which you couldn't before. But now I want it to be a pop-up, so if I try to change this value, obviously that's a huge change from 10,000 to 610,000. I want that to be a pop-up that says, hey, do you actually have the password? So you could have regular users who are allowed to copy these values, and you can have higher level users that are allowed to change them. And that way you might have 60 workers using this sheet, but only 5 people can change the values. Which means when you get an audit, you can say, hey, only these 5 people are allowed to change values. So if a value has been changed, it must be one of those. And before I go further, I want to say that you can go in here in the VBA editor to tools and say the VBA project properties, go to protection and add a password. So you would definitely want to add a password to VBA, because right now you can just go and check the passwords right here in my actual code, which definitely doesn't pass an audit. But right now I don't actually need this allow edit ranges to be created anymore, so I can comment that out, and I don't have to do anything else with the no part, because I just want the cells to be locked. And then I can go to when I say that I'm allowed to edit it, I'm just going to set that to no, and then I want it still to be protected, but now I want to add this code thing. So I want to add this allow edit ranges, which I already do. Actually no, I deleted here, so I want to add it now. Delete that part, to allow it to edit, and say add. Then I want to now when I have this set to no, nothing has changed. I still can't select the cells, and when I change it to be yes, I'm now able to select my cells, which again means I can copy the value and paste it somewhere. But if I try to change it, I did not add that properly. I have to actually make sure that the cells in A through C columns, they need to be locked, because you can't do this protection method if the cell is unlocked. All I need to do is change this false to be a true, and now I can add the allow edit ranges and it will work properly, because the allow edit ranges doesn't work when the cell is unlocked. So if you go in here, and actually I'm just going to run that. I had that up here, so run that. So now my sheet is unlocked. Then I have the allow edit ranges, and if we go in and check, it's now not locked, and it needs to be locked, because if I say it's unlocked, then obviously you're allowed to change it. And the allow edit ranges only works on a locked sheet where I've said that the cell should be locked. And that's why I needed to remember to change this from false to true. So now when I change no, nothing happens except these are locked. And when I say yes, they are unlocked, but actually they are locked. And I get this pop-up saying, hey, you actually need a password to change this, and you can't do that. And I have that written up here that was mega password, because they maybe edited yes, and I want to change that sales. I have to type in mega password, and now I'm allowed to change it. And I can do it for the other values as long as I haven't changed the value in D, so you still keep this allowance basically. And you can't change that because it's normally locked without having been added to that allow edit ranges. So if I change this to yes, now I can change it, but I have to type in the password again. But I can change the values for any cell where I've said that they are allowed to be changed after typing in the password. You'd want to change all of these rows to be yes if you have to change many values. Instead of changing one to yes, change that value, change this to yes, change that value. So, yep.